Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knittin' and Politickin', a weekly series of conversations on issues we face today. Tonight, I am so grateful to have Marquita Bradshaw, the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, on tonight to talk about environmental issues. My name is Renee Hoyos, and I'm running for Congress in Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District. As you all know, I was the executive director of the Tennessee Clean Water Network for 14 years. In that time, we sued dozens of companies and municipalities for violations of the Clean Water Act and the Tennessee Water Quality Control Act. We branched out into other environmental acts, but the Water Quality Act, or the Clean Water Act, was our priority. And I am grateful for my time there. I think it set me up for a campaign for Congress because I understand how public policy can make a community better and stronger, and how it can also weaken communities. Tonight, our guest, Marquita, has been involved in environmental justice all her life, and we'll get to hear about that tonight. But first, what am I working on this week? Well, I'm working on a birthday present for a great friend of mine, and I'm not going to show it tonight because she sometimes watches the show. However, I am going to tell you about a trip I took a couple weeks ago. I went to visit my friend Rodney's farm in Claiborne County to help him shear his sheep. You might remember him. I did a show with a few local farmers. And one of these days, I'm going to do a sheep to sweater project. But even better, I think it's so important to support our local farmers. And you can do that by buying your food at local farmers market or direct from the farm. So let's give our local farmers a shout out and support them as we're moving into the winter months where there'll be less income. So let's help them out. And if you are crafting tonight, feel free to join me with your projects and listen to Marquita and I swap environmental horror stories. And don't forget to post a photo of what you're working on in the Facebook comments so we can ooh and ah. Also tonight, keep your eyes out for a couple of quizzes we're going to drop in the comments. First one to guess right gets a shout out on the show. So keep your eyes peeled on the comments. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Marquita Bradshaw, Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate. Marquita, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Renee.
Oh, you are so welcome. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. Marquita, for those of us who don't know you yet, how about you spend a few minutes telling us about you and your campaign?
My name is Marquita Bradshaw, and I grew up down the street from a Superfund site. And that really shaped a lot of how I am today. I grew up in a working class community where everybody worked hard and we were rich in love and values. We had a strong, thriving community that saw the loss of manufacturing jobs. And so our local businesses began to dwindle away. Even our drive-in theater went away too. We didn't understand the dangers of what it meant to live down the street from a national priority list Superfund site until it was decommissioned in 1995. My mother started a group within the PTA to deal with issues around environmental justice issues. And my sisters and I, we followed suit when we saw that children were being affected by pollution with reproductive cancers, ovarian, testicular, prostate, and uterine cancer between the ages of 13 and 18. And I was a young mother, and I was like, no, that's not the kind of America that I wanted. And me and my sisters, we started Youth Terminating Pollution, which was revolutionary in that time because there were a lot of environmental groups, but to have a youth-led environmental justice group was revolutionary. And so we worked diligently to interact with federal agencies and hold elected officials accountable and look for transparency when it comes to environmental laws. And so that's how I got started. How I got here today is that I was tired of environmental laws rolling back, and being from working class, I felt like I needed someone to represent me, a hardworking person who works hard every week and still have problems having health care and sometimes securing energy because of the energy burden is so great here in Memphis. And a lot of people are facing those issues right now during the pandemic. And the reason why I'm running is because I just want to serve hardworking people to have a true representation, because we have so many millionaires there that they forget about the experience that hardworking people have.
Yeah, well, that's just, your story is just so fascinating. People have asked me if you and I have worked together. And well, we didn't. I think we were working in like these circles sort of around each other, because I know we know all the same people. And I think it was Rita Harris, who was the environmental justice coordinator for the Sierra Club in Memphis, introduced me to your mom, Doris. And we had briefly discussed, and by we, I mean the Tennessee Clean Water Network, getting involved with the Velsicol issue in your neighborhood. But you guys had it all, like, you guys had it all dialed in. You really didn't need any help. So we turned our attention to the Memphis sewage problem. And, you know, I think one of the things that I've noticed that we lack in this state is enough environmental organizations that are well funded to handle these problems, these community problems. There's just not enough for all the problems that are going around. And I know that you were involved in a couple of groups, but I mean, I'm sure you can speak to the difficulty of trying to be heard when everybody's just trying to keep their own lives in order while trying to deal with this monster of a super fund.
Well, one thing is that we were an organization that was underfunded because most of the money went to the Big Tens, the Big Ten environmental organization. We were an environmental justice organization. That means that we address environmental racism head on. So what does environmental racism look like in Tennessee? There are over 1,100 Superfund sites, whether they are National Priority List Superfund site, active, or archive. It's 1,100 of those across Tennessee. How does 220 of those end up in one city like Memphis? Mm-hmm. So that's what environmental racism looks like. And so to be an environmental justice advocate is more than just being an environmentalist. It looks at how environmental policies affect actual people. Like some environmentalists want to save the birds, the trees, and the water. And yeah, we need all those things. But we came into this movement trying to save the Black people that were experiencing environmental laws differently, the brown, indigenous, and poor whites.
Yeah, you know, when I talk to folks about the environment, you know, the environmental community was really created by a lot of rich white men that wanted to hike. Mm-hmm. And so for years, the environmental community was really about preserving the last great places on earth. And who doesn't want to do that? I have a sick kitty. Is she like all over me right now? Can you?
It's all right.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah. She's, yeah. At any rate, yeah, I mean, it was really a big part of the environmental community really was focused on the non-human aspects of the environment and ignoring the fact that we live in community with the natural world. And I think the environmental community, one of the big things I could say that to fault it is that for a long time it separated out human communities, both here and then in the third world, in the global south. Those Big 10 that you spoke of were all about moving indigenous communities out so that the rest of the biosphere could be preserved. And that is really something that we have to change when we start thinking about environmental work and environmental justice, because it can't just be about the critters. It has to be about all of us.
Yeah. So, when you look at any social justice movement, mm-hmm. when you hear the term environmental justice, when you hear reproductive justice, that's because there's a group of Black, brown, indigenous, and poor whites who are looking to have a voice in that particular movement. And environmental justice, we didn't want to call it an environmental racism movement, so we called it the environmental justice movement. And we were successful because we were able to get an executive order passed, and now environmental justice is an actual legal term where we have a framework of language where we can actually move from and make policy from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that environmental justice, it was an executive order passed by, signed into law by President Clinton, and interestingly is still around. It's not been rescinded by successive presidents, so that's good. Can you tell us a little bit about what's in the environmental justice executive order?
Well, it recognized environmental justice communities. A lot of that work was done by Hazel Johnson in Chicago to get that done. She's considered the mother of environmental justice, and you can go online to read more about that. But it came from the work of so many environmental justice communities across the United States, to define that everyone needs healthy and safe communities where they live, learn, work, worship, and recreate, and that policies should be enforced in a way. Environmental policy should be enforced in a way where Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor whites have healthy and safe communities. And so I'm actually running on an environmental justice platform, and it's the first time in American history that we've had someone in the US Senate level actually run on an environmental justice platform. And you actually, based on environmental justice principles that was developed by people in the movement, you lead by listening. And so you have to be able to take the narratives of the people who live closest to the pain to be able to have those voices included into the solution.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the realities of what brought about the environmental justice movement, because I think, so many people that may be watching this are still, think of the environment as, saving the last great places on earth. And we left out, an entire segment of the population. So I know, and you talked about the experience in your own community, but Superfund sites in this country, are woefully underfunded. There's no more money, I believe, in the Superfund program in order to fix these sites. And
Right.
so when your community discovered you were on a Superfund, right?
Yeah, so notices went out when the Base Closure Act, 1995 Base Closure Act happened to a select few people in the neighborhood. And our house happened to be one of those houses where this notice that looked like junk mail, just pretty much, we threw it away probably several times, and it just flew around the house. And eventually my mom picked it up and read it. And she's like, well, I think we need to find out what's going on with this site, and what is it doing to the people's health and the children's health, because it was right across the street from my elementary school. A lot of times people do not tie what goes on in the physical environment to people's health. And so those are intertwined. If you remember, in mining communities, they used to take a canary into the mine to actually indicate when the air quality was bad, because they knew that if they saw, one person's job was to watch that canary to see if the canary died. And when that canary died, they had so many minutes to get out of that mine, because they knew that was. Well, our physical environment is actually talking to us now, and it's telling us those things. It may show up like it did in our neighborhoods where the amphibians went away first. You didn't see any tadpoles and frogs. And then it was the pets, and then the fruit trees died, and the people started to die. And so this was very traumatic to our neighborhood, to see how those chemicals not only affected us, but the people around us. One of my friends had breast cancer, and her bird did too.
Yeah, I mean, these sites, and they always call it a Superfund site when it's closed, but yet while it's open, it's still doing the same things.
Oh, it was doing a whole bunch of horrible things when it was open.
Yeah, it's almost arguably worse when it's open.
Yeah, it had 7 incinerators, and it burned nerve gas, mustard gas, and other chemical weapons. There was Deldrin, DDT, among many endocrine disruptors and chemicals that cause cancer. They did open burials where they just dug a hole and just poured chemicals in it. They lost nuclear warhead missiles in the cleanup process. And let's see, there were also munitions stored there, and there was surface water runoff, groundwater contamination, aquifer contamination, air contamination, and soil contamination. And so, just bad all around.
Yeah. Now, what people also don't realize is a lot of that was legal. The burning of munitions is actually legal. You can't burn nuclear weapon, but they're burning over in the Holston ammunition plant, a facility that we sued for water quality violations, but we couldn't get to the air stuff because so much of it was like, yeah, they're allowed to burn that. And then the argument comes, how are you going to burn it safely? And I think one thing that we tried to tell people was that, pollution isn't just Kingston or the Gulf oil spill, that pollution happens every day. And a lot of it is considered legal. They have to run these tests, and if they fall under a certain limit, they're okay. But, that limit can be pretty dangerous to a community. And I think your candidacy is so important because you can deliver that message when these laws are being considered, and you can have first-hand experience.
Absolutely. Like right now, some of our children are not returning to schools.
Mhm.
But before, there was an issue with lead being in the schools. And the houses were built the same time that the schools were. So right now with children being at home, that they're probably being exposed to, if it was lead in the schools, it's also lead in the homes. And so there is no safe threshold for lead. Let me repeat that. There are no safe thresholds for exposure to lead. And it is extremely dangerous for the development of children. And also, it impacts women and their reproductive systems with heavy menstrual cycles and miscarriages and infertility also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not safe even for adults.
Right. And yet, I believe there's a threshold for lead that, so it's like, yeah, so like we all know the science knows this, and the policy does not keep up, and I think that's when, policy is making it harder on communities by not keeping up with science.
And so as this administration has rolled back a lot of environmental laws, right? And the fact that those standards hadn't been updated sometimes for 40 or 50 years. And it's just time for somebody to be in the United States Senate and also in Congress with the knowledge of these environmental concerns. So that's the reason why I'm really excited to stump with Renee Hoyos and Blair Wisingham. Am I saying her last name right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm really excited to stump with them because I don't think we've ever had this opportunity to send 3 women who are working on environmental justice issues or environmental issues, because Blair is also a member of Sierra Club, to Congress and the United States Senate. This is historical.
Yeah.
And this is something that it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. When people say, when I asked them, I was like, so are your leaders talking about environmental policy? And if they're not, why? And that's the reason why you need to vote for me. And we flipped some Republicans in the primary. So we flipped the hardest people in the primary, and we brought in the young voters in the primary. And so now we just need to keep talking to our neighbors to let them know that they have a choice of American values that protects the environment and creates jobs with the Green New Deal. And people who are concerned about education that are being high quality, no matter what zip codes you are in. And also candidates who understand that you have to build an economy for hardworking families and not just the rich and powerful.
Yeah, that's right. And the environment is a great way to meld all of that, because you can't have a great economy if your workers are sick, because the people that are generating they're the workers of the economy aren't coming to work, and that's what this economy is built on: working and buying and spending. And and so children aren't going to school because they're sick. I mean, it's all really intertwined. All right, we dropped our first quiz into the comments. How many trees are cut down each day so that we can have toilet paper? A, 45,000, B, 27,000, C, 15,000. Emma Hines got it right. So Emma was an intern at the Tennessee Clean Water Network. So she learned a lot when she was there. Excellent. What is the answer? Gosh, I don't even know what the answer is. Emma, what was the answer? I think it's 27,000. I can't see Facebook from here. All right, folks, if you have questions for Marquita or me, please put them in the comment section. We're going to continue this conversation about environmental justice because it's so important. So moving right along, folks have been, we've got this environment issue and we've got climate change. I think we all understand the climate is changing. And now we have a pandemic. And, a lot of folks are starting to connect the dots about the environment and how it relates to, current disease. The answer was B, 27,000 trees cut down so that we can have toilet paper. Let's talk a little bit about, what's going to happen to, Marquita just left for a sec. Come on back, Marquita.
I think it's just my phone ringing. It just hadn't stopped ringing since
okay.
election day.
Well, we've got this pandemic on the rise, and talking about the intersection between healthcare, and the environment. And so, what are your thoughts about all of that intersectionality of environment and health and pandemics and things like that?
So if you hadn't been paying attention, it's certain communities that have been hit harder when it comes to deaths within COVID-19. Immigrant communities, Black and Brown communities, and Indigenous communities. A lot of times those communities are not able to access the economic system like everybody else. So they're experiencing poverty, and which is a pre-existing condition. And also pollution is a pre-existing condition. Environmental induced diseases sometimes do not manifest, especially if you don't have health care. You wouldn't know that you have an environmental induced disease from pollution. And most of the time, doctors are not even equipped to even look for environmental induced diseases in these communities. And so those are all pre-existing conditions that were pandemics of pollution and pandemics of poverty existing before the pandemic of COVID-19. And so all of those things make certain communities get harder when it comes to the pandemic.
Yeah. I think, and may not be the only pandemic. The last one was 100 years ago. It was the flu pandemic that we had, the Spanish flu. But now there's an opportunity for there to be more pandemics and more types of diseases because the world is warming up. And we need to be prepared for those. And so combating climate change, I think, is a great way to start. But then we also have to deal with poverty and, immigration and all of these other things that, we always seem to push to the back burner. And I guess I'm so heartened to see so many working class people step up to run, because we're the ones that have had the experience, and we're the ones that have had to live with these decisions that have been made or have not been made. I mean, not making a decision is making a decision as well. And I think for things especially around health, not making a decision has put us into this position. Our president has not made any decisions about COVID. He's going to let this thing burn its way, especially through the South, with all of these really endangered communities. And, and then we're just going to have to figure out some way to pick up the pieces. I'm going to pivot here. There was a question asked to both of us. is there any chance that there's going to be a debate between me and Congressman Burchett and you and Mr. Haggerty? What do you think the chances are?
Absolutely no chance for me, because I do not want to give space for people to continue to to uh, to push hate and division.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what people of Tennessee need or want.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather spend time connecting with voters across the Tennessee that want change. So for me, no. But that may be different for you, Renee.
Oh yeah, I'd love to debate Tim. I would love it. He won't do it. We got last election cycle, we got tricked onto being on the same show at the same time with WBIR has a Sunday news show. And the footage is still up on WBIR's website if you want to see it. I was thrilled to get the chance to sit next to him and talk about issues, and he was unhappy. And, I think it flipped a lot of people, because there were people that said, I've known him for years. I could not believe the way he was behaving, so arrogant and unpleasant, and not engaging in the spirit of, let's deal with these issues. And, as you've mentioned, things have gotten even worse now. I mean,
Right.
Anybody following him on Twitter, I mean, he's just stoking a lot of racial hatred and a lot of just really bad things. So it would probably, you're right, Marquita, it'd probably devolve into something. But usually with moderators, they keep it pretty sane. But I would like for people to see a stark difference between me and him. Because there is a stark one. Because I want my campaign to be about, our values, what we value. We value each other, and we value hard work and commitment and all of these things. We value our communities. And, East Tennessee has a rich, progressive tradition. We were occupied by the Confederacy. TVA started here, the largest public-private utility in the country. I mean, so many great things have happened. Tennessee gave women the right to vote. It was the final state to ratify the 19th Amendment. So many great things here, and we can have those things again, and that's what I think you and I are about. It's about bringing those values about people, hardworking people, back to the forefront, instead of, giving them a lot of fear and then ignoring them until the next election cycle.
No, it's all about bringing people into this process where they can participate fully, and if they can stay connected with their leaders in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another question. Don wants to know, what kind of legislation do you want to enact? What kinds of things do you want to work on when you get to, specifically when you get to the Senate?
And so, of course, there are a lot of environmental policies I want to put forward. And you can go to my website, marquitabradshaw.com, to
drop that
see
in the
that
comments.
that I support the Green New Deal, and it's just a start. Not only to bring jobs, but to renew our sewage infrastructure, our electrical grid that's aging, and our water infrastructure needs to be replaced, and our bridges, and then to put those investments in transportation, so places that want to have car-free societies can actually do that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, those are all great things, and all things we have needed for years and years and years and years. And I think it's important.
And of course, healthcare. Like, we're not going to gloss over that. Like, it's understood. Like, everybody needs healthcare at this point.
What's been interesting in the pandemic, and I wonder if you've noticed this as well, that so many people that were like, I want to keep my insurance, I want to keep what I have, are now finding that, it's important that everyone be covered.
Yes.
Because somebody can breathe on you, and 2 weeks later, you'll be on a ventilator.
Absolutely. And it's like, we've had scares within our family, that I wasn't exposed, but like one of my sisters, she had a COVID scare, and she went to work, and she was exposed almost 4 different times, and she had to get tested 4 different times. I had another sister that was exposed, and she was asymptomatic, and so she had to be quarantined for so long. And even just with staff going out, I want to make sure that we are safe in this pandemic. We are going to put in to kind of normalize getting tested. And so I actually had my first test, and it wasn't that bad. But it was not comfortable, but it wasn't that bad.
Oh, it's like way up there tickling your brain. I don't know. Oh,
No, it didn't go to the brain, but it went far enough.
that's what it
It
looks
was not.
like through that long
Yeah,
stick.
yeah. So
Um,
actually, he used one that was about this long, so he didn't use the real long one. But he was like, "Oh no, that's not even necessary," and I was like, "Oh good," because I was like about to have a heart attack, but not really.
yeah, I am totally squeamish. Marquita, are you still working or are you able to do this full time?
I am still I, I am still working,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to work enough so I can do this full time at the end.
Excellent.
So I'm picking up extra hours where I can and still campaigning full time uh, 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 after work and on my breaks, Monday through Wednesday, and then full stumping Thursday through Sunday and traveling.
Wow. Yeah, that's tough. I think people don't realize that campaigning for a federal seat is really a full-time job. And so you're doing two full-time jobs. So good on you,
Absolutely.
Marquita. Woof.
It's all about, I knew with eyes wide open that I wanted to serve people. And that's what it was all about. Just trying to make sure that people like my family that are hardworking have a voice in the US Senate that was going to fight for them just like they were part of my family.
Right. Well, Marquita, I got a really good question for you. Randall asks, Marquita, if elected, you would be working alongside Marsha Blackburn. How do you think that would go?
We'll have to figure that out as we go along. We'll have to figure that out. But, it's all about knowing that the values that we are going to be fighting for are core American values. And whether Marsha can get along with it or not, we will find other senators that will work with us, right? And because everybody's heart is not as hard and it's hers, and her time is coming. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, we are in such a crazy partisan turfed out time in this country and gaps, and it's not easy. When I was working the legislature doing clean water legislation back in the early aughts, 2005 to 2009, there was a lot of push to deregulate, clean water here in Tennessee. But I always found Republicans that would be like, yeah, I'll sponsor that. That's a good idea. And those same Republicans, years later, just, sort of went, deeper and deeper into, a place that I couldn't find them anymore. I couldn't, I could, there was no place to talk. It was like, well, what happened? We used to be good friends and, not close, but you'd always let me in your office and listen to, and talk about your legislation. And so it is going to be harder, but we have to make that effort. I think you'll agree that we've got to do the work to reach out that hand and keep
And
reaching it.
so a
Yeah.
part of this work is educating people that
Hmm.
are not Democrats and not voters about what it means to move towards a society where we have an environment that has a just transition away from pollution, that addresses environmental racism. Because when something about, I think is interesting, uh, 100 years of suffrage for women, even though Black women were not included in that, we still fought for suffrage. Like Sojourner Truth, Ain't I a Woman? You should read it. Uh,
Hmm.
you look at that, it's always been mothers and women in environmental movements. And so we look at the women here today that are going forth to represent the state of Tennessee um, because of environmental issues, because of our children,
Hmm.
um, education, and because we want everybody to be able to participate in our economy. because when you leave people out, it causes problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, my grandfather was a union organizer, and he used to say, be careful what you do to poor people, because when they don't have anything left to lose, that's when, you know, it comes back at you. And I've always thought about that in the way that we've wanted to do, you know, environmental, you know, deal with environmental racism. It's like you want to take care of all people. Why are we leaving people out? I mean, I think that is the question we have to ask, and I think
And
we all know
so,
what the answer is.
yeah, and it's at such a time as this when people are ready to confront racism in the criminal
Mm-hmm.
justice system, they're also wanting to remove it in every piece of fabric of America. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's up to us to be courageous enough as leaders to say that we'll be able to take that responsibility in order to lay to bed that old type of thinking, and making sure that we make policy that can happen overnight, that it eventually change those attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Yeah. All right, we dropped another question into the chat. How many years does it take for a glass bottle to decompose? A, 4,000, B, 2,500, and C, 1 million, how's that, 200,000 years. And the answer is 4,000 years. Michael from Twitter guessed that, but Natalie said her 9-year-old says it takes 1 million. So I'm shouting out Natalie's 9-year-old, and I'm shouting out Michael. So there you go, a little compromise. Well, Marquita, I think we are at the end of our time. Is there something that you would like the public to know, all the listening public, about your campaign, about you, about what you want us to all do and accomplish in the time we have left?
This is our time to make history together. We can move forward as a nation by what we do here in Tennessee. The types of leaders that we elect in Tennessee can shape the whole nation. Your vote counts. What you do on the census matters, because next year, the person that you elect is going to use what you put on that census to advocate the resources that you need in your communities at a federal level. That's the reason why you need to send somebody who's working class just like you, that works hard just like you. And you can go to my website, marquitabradshaw.com, to learn more about my personal story, and also why I'm running, and the issues that shape of the narratives of people across Tennessee. This is a people's policy. And if you don't see anything in there that reflects you, reach out to us, because we want to make sure that we capture all the narratives of Tennessee. So when I go to Washington, D.C., you know I'm fighting for you, and I have my mandate of what I should be fighting for. My name is Marquita Bradshaw, and I'm working hard to be your next United States Senator.
Marquita, one last quick question. Where can we get a Bradshaw t-shirt?
Oh, go. We got some Bradshaw t-shirts coming to you. Your coordinator is Matthew Park.
Okay.
Congressional coordinator is Matthew Park. They're getting onboarded this week, and there'll be a congressional coordinator for each congressional district that will be able to get signs, t-shirts, and also get people plugged into events. And so if you actually volunteer to phone bank, you will probably get a t-shirt and a sign in the mail within a couple of weeks.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. You are a great candidate, and you are going to serve your constituents well. Everybody, candidates need 2 things: votes and money. And I'm going to assume the listening audience is a voting audience. And now I want you to be a supporter to both of our campaigns. We put a link in to Marquita's website, so you can go there and support her. You know how to get to me. No donation is too small, and we need your support. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Take care and be safe, and I will see you next week.